It's 11 o'clock, and I want to respect you guys' time, so we want to get started today. My name is Timothy Ford. I've been here since 2011, and I've been doing this sort of stuff probably for 15, 20 years in various forms of fashion. What I mean by this sort of stuff, thinking about how we can create learning environments so that all students can be successful. Pretty much every time you read something about achievement, there's a gap. A few places have it right, but for the most part, the gap remains. And in 2017, for us to have a gap, despite all the best practices and all the innovative teaching practices that are going on, we've got to continue to address it. So I don't think anything that I'm going to say today or that we're going to share today will be earth-shattering or new. I don't think there's a silver bullet, but it does take some intentionality. It does take some reframing. It does take us rethinking what we're doing as educators. I always like to start out by finding out who you are. Some of you, most of you I know, seen once or twice, but for the benefit of all, I would like for you to briefly state your name and your department and state one fun fact. It could be whatever you want it to be. One fun fact. So your name, how long you've been at EKU, and one fun fact. Let's start all the way in the back with Ralph, and then we go down the road and come up this way.
Ralph Turner, college vet, curriculum instruction department.
Give me something, Ralph. Nothing. Okay. You skis. All right. One fun fact. That's all I'm asking for. Yes.
I'm Jessica Price. I teach in Health Services Administration, and this is my very first semester ever teaching. But something like fun.
Awesome. Okay. Great. First semester here as well.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
I'm from here.
Oh.
Yeah, I graduated from here twice.
Oh. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And
Chuck Elliott, Biological Sciences. I teach the wildlife program. I do work on skunks.
That is fun.
great.
Clint Pinion, Department of Environmental Science. It's my second year. A fun fact, I used to clog at Maria when I was an undergrad.
Oh, very good.
Maybe weird fact, not so much fun.
Okay. Okay. Good.
I'm Christina Bolton. I'm a librarian. I work in the library. I would probably like to live in 5 different countries in my lifetime.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Yes.
My name is Sarah. I'm in the psychology department. I'm from Spain. It's not fun.
You guys don't want to tell anything fun. Come on. All work and no fun is no fun. Not good. Anything fun? Anything? Any interesting, fun?
Oh, I don't. Okay, I have something. I don't know if it's fun, but I was able to follow my family tree until like 8 generations, like 200 years ago.
Awesome. 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 Pam, we'll come back to you. We're saying our name, how long we've been at EKU, and one fun fact. That's being hard, challenging, but we're going to get it. All right, Gail, talk to us.
Okay, so I'm Gail Spear from Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy, and I've been living in Israel for the past 25 years, came to EKU. But the fun fact,
Okay.
I just crossed something off my bucket list this week. Went to the Beach Boys concert here and heard them singing Surfin' USA. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
I'm Alex. I work in the Instructional Design Center for eCampus. I used to be an adjunct for AFA. Lost my way. My fun fact is that I was born on the exact day and year that the Berlin Wall came down.
We can tell she's a history buff, right? We know that. Very good. Yes.
My name is Kelly Smith. I'm a librarian here in the library. I've been here for 12 years. And my fun fact, which is fun for me, is that I've lived in 7 different states. And so that's a lot of interesting stuff I've learned about living in different places.
Okay. Very good. And last but not least, Pam.
Okay. My name is Pam White. I've worked, I currently work in a social work program, anthropology, sociology, and social work. I've I've worked here since 1993 for Eastern, but full-time as a professor since 2000. I'm ready to retire.
Wow.
As soon as I know what Bevan's gonna do. And then a fun fact, many years ago, I was engaged and got engaged in the Sea of Galilee.
Oh, good girl.
Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful trip.
Awesome, awesome.
I didn't get married to him. But it was
So you went to this one.
yes, I'll say. No, he's a great person. We just had a fun part. That was a fun part.
And I think, Laura, did you come in afterwards?
I did.
Okay.
I'm sorry, incredibly early for everything except today, apparently. My name is Laura Vance. I am with the Student Success Center. And I guess my fun fact is I already had a child when the Berlin Wall came down. So, wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's okay. That's okay. And regularly, I'll say something pop culture from my area, and my readers are like, I have no idea what's going on.
Okay, okay. And how long have you been here? At Eastern?
I've been at EKU, it'll be 5 years next month.
5 years, wow, wow. So we've got from 1 semester to 19, 20 years, right? Okay, great, great. So I always like to start off with that fun because people tend to think twice. How many of you think learning should be fun? That's a fun fact for me because that's not how I was brought up. It was just sweat and tears and pain. But in my later years, I've kind of developed, Ralph, that what if we could make learning something that was a fun, enjoyable, transformative experience? Let me kick this off by sharing a little bit about my history, educational history. I was trained as a public health researcher with a master's in epidemiology. I was interested in health inequities. And I was doing research at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. And among my duties, I was developing a health preventive program because at the time we had a large HIV positive population among low-income African-American students. So in the midst of conducting focus groups, I visited this classroom, and as I did often, I would listen, see what's going on in the classroom, and I would leave. One particular time, Laura, as I was leaving, this little girl looked up at me and said, "Bye, Daddy." And that shook me to my core for several reasons. What is it about the stature of the teacher that the student would give that kind of import? That they would put that person in a parental role. How many of you have children? So you all know that you all don't know nothing and your teachers know everything, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But more importantly for me, I was seeing patterns where these kids that I was dealing with in an after-school basis, after-school programs, tutoring, in schools, in the school, they were being referred to special ed, where they were flunking out. So one thing led to another. We got an NSF grad for 5 years. I started an alternative school, directing an alternative school. And we went to the schools and said, we want all the kids that you are giving social promotions to. You want to know what a social promotion is? If you just come to class and be good, I will pass you. So you have 8th and 9th graders who can't read. We took all of those kids and put them in our school, put them in our curriculum in them, gave them work, gave them tutoring, then introduced the tutoring before they came to term. We were doing that stuff. We, Laura, we call every day to make sure they got to school. We went by and visit the schools every day, make sure they got their homework. When they finished, we helped them with their homework and make sure they turned their homework in, make sure they went home at night. We got calls 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, hey, my son is in jail, blah, 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 blah. We were parents. But as a result of that, most of those kids graduated from high school. Some of them got 4-year scholarships, and we turned them around. And it's not so much we turned them around. We were able to light a fire under them. We were able to create a sense of belonging and care, teach them to self-monitor, teach them how to monitor their own progress. And we won several awards, went to DC, all this and all that. The big thing though is, here I am, 25 years later, and we're still having the same conversations. Look at Kentucky data. There's still an achievement gap. Any state in USA, there's still an achievement gap. Why? I don't know if there's one single reason, but the reason that I'm going to put forth today is we're not doing a good job of making sure that we're culturally competent. We're not doing a good job of understanding who it is we're teaching. Healthcare, occupational, your department, you guys got it. You all understand that if you don't understand your client, you're going to lose them. You guys got it. A lot of the cultural competency research started in the healthcare industry. But in the other areas, in the biology, Chuck, and in education, and psychology even, I don't know if we've made that shift. I often joke to some of my college psychology friends, that no, not that intended, is that, when they did research, it was pretty much normed on white males. And then in the laboratory, even the mice are even the rats are white. So there's not enough diversity. Right? And so what happens when you build on that model, you have kids who cannot relate to what's going on, and in turn they don't experience a sense of belonging, and in turn they feel left out, and in turn they're not engaged, and then we want to label them. They're just not engaged. Because as teachers, we haven't engaged them. So today, I want to have a conversation, not a lecture, a conversation. And we're going to talk about some things. So as opposed to being something that I can give you some strategies, no, I want us to engage in a conversation about theory of knowing, which is different from a theory of learning. Theory of knowing is, some people call it constructivism. How do we know? How do you know something? And how can we build on that so that we can talk about instructional strategies? So let me tell you right up front. You should be engaged in 3 things in my mind. When you're working with students, teach them to know. Teach them to care. And teach them to act. Those 3. That's where it is for me. Horace Mann said it best. If you're not engaged in some kind of enterprise where you're helping humanity, you should be ashamed to die. And that doesn't apply to any of us because we're all here. Ralph could be in the private world, probably making 3 times his salary with all of the things he's done and the scholar and all this, but he chose to teach at EKU no less. I'm not going to talk about my friend who left AFA. She's one of our best teachers at AFA.
Yeah, I'm from history. You can't make 3 times anyway.
Well, this is but you guys are here, Chuck, Pam, you guys are here because you're phenomenal teachers, even if you've only been here a semester, right? So, given that, what can we do to start thinking differently? Because it is the height of insanity to do the same thing and want different results. And essentially, that's what we're doing. Hence this notion of culturally responsive pedagogy, or pedagogy, however you want to refer to it, or CRP. It's a concept that has been around for years. They've put several names on it. People have come up with their own variations. Pretty much means pretty much the same thing. Gloria Lasson-Billings, she's probably one of the most prominent researchers and scholars to talk about this whole concept of, in order to effectively teach our students, you've got to engage all of them. It matters where they come from. It matters their background. It matters how they think, their social norms, their cultural norms. One person called it their cultural uniqueness that has to be considered in the teaching enterprise. So, Chuck, no longer am I just a biology teacher. I'm a teacher who teaches biology. Understand the difference? Biology as a science has been evolving for thousands of years. If I could draw something, and imagine that I'm a virtual artist, all right? This is a lake. What is this, everybody? A lake. Come on, talk to me. This is a what?
Like,
This is a lake. All right. In my lake, there's a huge mountain. Lake, mountain. This mountain represents all the biology knowledge that has been accumulating for thousands of years. That's what this mountain is. Imagine my lake. Big mountain. Over here, little island. Little island, big mountain. The little island represents the background knowledge or the background that I have as a student about biology. Get it? My knowledge, all the biology knowledge. In between there is a bridge. And I'm the teacher sitting over the bridge. You know what I'm doing? I'm helping that kid build a bridge from his little knowledge of biology, put your own subject in there, to the mountain of biology that has been established for thousands of years. That perspective is important. Because what I'm concerned about is understanding how I can best reach that kid to help that kid build a bridge. I'm not building it for him, I'm helping him build the bridge. When you do that, to me, that's the ultimate goal of learning. A child can self-monitor, they can set their own learning goals, they know how to create, they know how to subtract, they know how to learn. And that doesn't really happen when you're sitting up in front of them talking to them like I'm doing. All right? So there are a lot of things that come into place. Now I want to hear from you. You all signed up, some of you I've seen once or twice before in similar sessions. What are your thoughts about culturally responsive pedagogy, just in general? What do you see the value? What value do you see in it, if you see any? Chuck, I'm going to start with you since I've been picking on you.
Well, we talked before, and it's still, it just still comes from what when I went to high school. There were the kids that were accelerated, the kids over here that didn't get it, and they were taught at two different levels. We were all advanced the same just to make room for the next group coming in. It's in there, and I have my minority students, and you're sitting there, and it's like, okay, we got X amount of material, we got to get across here. And I'm seeing you're losing. The performance on exams, and it's like, how do I bring them over? Because I don't have all that much time. And it's like, I don't like the way it went for me in high school. Fortunately, I was able to stay with one group, but the other people were behind. For the people I go back and see, and they're still in that same spot, they're still in that same rut. They're never going to go anywhere because that's where they were at the very beginning, and they had it in their mind that they were in the slow group, but they didn't progress. And I see it, happening again in the college level class. I don't know. I get caught in terms of, okay, what do I do? I mean, I can't spend the whole time one-on-one or something like that, and then it's like, okay, well, we have these tutoring sessions and tutoring resources and all of these sorts of things, and you go back and check, and they don't show up, or they showed up for a few minutes and left, and it's like, I'm not quite sure. I mean, there's still an amount of material I've got to get that these people have to have before they move to the next one with some measure of confidence. But I don't know. What more? I mean, I don't know. That's what still.
This is why we're here to try to talk some of this stuff through. Laura, talk to me. What do you think about this approach, this whole culture responsive pedagogy?
Well, when people ask me why I like to work at EKU, I say it's in the mission statement, it's a school of opportunity. But one thing that always worries me is that I think that we don't see that as active on our part. So it's like, well, we let you here, we're giving you the opportunity, now it's up to you to take it. But they usually don't know enough to figure out how to make the most of that opportunity, and we need to be more active in getting that across to them. And I mean, if
you know me, I'm a big believer in forcing freshmen to do things. So they don't come to tutoring. So we need to find ways that make them take advantage of these resources, because a lot of them come from school systems that didn't have those resources. They are often not aware that they exist here, or if they're aware that they exist, they think it's not for them, or I'll look stupid, or that imposter syndrome takes over and they're like, I don't want anybody to find me out. But then they start falling behind in classes, so we're going to find you out. But we, as an institution, have to be actively engaging them to get them there, because just providing them with opportunities not enough.
Not enough. Yeah. I'm here for one more. Alex, talk to me.
I like culturally responsive teaching because it puts the burden on the teachers who are in typically positions of dominance and power to learn their students' languages rather than having the students be forced always to learn the culture of power and the language of whiteness and all that.
Okay. We could unpack some of that. So Chuck, to your point, I hear what you're saying, and maybe we need to ask some different type questions in terms of why do we always feel like we've got to cover all these points when we know 50% of the class is not going to get them anyway. I mean, there's some essential questions, big questions that maybe we need to think about. But my time is slowly or fast going away, and I like interactivity because I think that way we can bring out kernels of truth. So those of you who've been with me before, please forgive me, but I love this exercise. All right, here we go. Horse, dog, monkey, fish. What is this?
Horse, dog, monkey, fish.
I heard like 3 people. Come on, guys.
Horse, dog, monkey, fish.
All right. In this class, I say, Sarah, in order for you to get an A in this class, you got to climb that tree. Who's going to get an A? Why is the monkey going to get an A? Because what? Really? So you're saying my fish can't climb the tree?
Throw them up there.
My dog can't climb a tree?
Just a little.
Just a little? Horse definitely can't climb a tree? No? So as a teacher, why would I give an assessment that only the monkey can complete? It's me? I'm mean? What do you think, Ralph? Why am I only giving an assessment that only the monkey can complete? Maybe the dog can climb up 2 or 3 limbs.
You could be trying to separate people out, or separate out the participants.
Okay. Okay. Maybe it's easy.
Stuck in your ways.
You're a
Stuck
monkey
in-
too.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You're a monkey too.
Ooh.
Climb a tree. Why can't everybody?
That's
Oh.
right. Oh.
Let me get closer to you. When you present your information, how many ways do you give for your students to demonstrate mastery? Ouch. Do you assume that there's only one way to demonstrate mastery? Or are you taking into account that you have students that have different skills in your classroom and that you may need different types of assessments so that each person can show or demonstrate their mastery? 5 minutes. Get in groups and try to figure out if there's one assessment that you can come up with that will allow each of my students to demonstrate their mastery. These are my students. Not unlike the students you have. They all come with different strengths. All of them. And if you only teach one way, and if you only assess one way, guess what? The students who don't learn that way, they're not going to get it. But here's the rubber. Here's the bad part. Sometimes we accuse these students of not being able to learn because they can't climb a tree. But you ask them to swim, and they'll beat everybody in the room.
This is America. Can't you do anything if you try hard enough?
I love it. Get in groups of 2 or 3 and talk about this. Then we'll come back. Okay, let's get back together. Time's up.
Yeah.
Okay, so guys, So, let me review what I asked you guys to do.
So they have
And then I want to unpack some assumptions. I presented you with students. All of them have different backgrounds and different strengths and weaknesses. What is interesting about your conversation is that most of you know the characteristics of each of these animals. And intuitively, you told me, well, no, the fish can't do that, or the horse can't do that. You knew a lot of background knowledge about your students. Can I translate that to your students that you currently teach? So you have no idea what they can and cannot do. So you're making some assumptions from Jump Street. Oops. I like what you were saying. Clint, is it?
Yeah.
Clint, I'd love share your comment with us because you did something that directly relates to it. Talk about your student.
I had a student that English is her second language, Arabic is her primary language, and she failed my first exam. And it was a big gap between the next person above her and her test score. I mean, it was remarkably different. And so basically, I met with her one-on-one, and she shared with me that a written study guide would help her because she takes the notes and answers the questions in Arabic so that she can understand the content in more depth. And the next exam, just by doing that and allowing her, instead of having an exam on Wednesday, because the class is Monday and Wednesday, I'll do all exams now on Monday, so she has a whole weekend so she can translate. I know it's a little extreme for one student, but so she did that and she increased by 40% on her next exam.
Wow. Now, notice what he didn't say. He didn't say he let her take the exam twice. He didn't say that he dumbed down. He got the same rigor by just changing a couple of variables to fit the student. She performed. Pam, talk about your student.
The student that
The
I was
dog,
talking
yeah,
about that
yes.
has to, so I teach a practice, which is assessments, a lot of writing. It actually would be a writing intensive course. And I have a student that she has to come to the Noel Center for every assignment, every written assignment she has to come for. And I had her last semester. I've seen her grow, but she still has to come. And it doesn't matter, how I see it is whatever your outcome you give me, how you get there, very little doesn't matter to me. It's just that if she can do the work and she writes it, and I've seen improvements in it, but every time she has to come here. And the only adjustment I give is she may have to turn it in a day late because she doesn't get an appointment. But she always, and she puts the effort into it. And as long as the outcome's there, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever how she gets it, and the resources. As long as the resources are there for her. And I think the EKU does a great job with the resources for the student to get there.
How did you guys talk about this?
We gotta talk.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that, but I'm trying to give us something. Give us something.
I objected to the metaphor because I feel like it implies that there's inherent biological differences between your students' abilities, and I object that.
Inherent biological too. I need you to make the leap though, that we all are different and we have different backgrounds, and so we have different ways of knowing. That's the whole thing about culture. Culture is a group of shared beliefs and actions, and we all have different ones. But culture is good because it gives us a framework or a lens in order to interpret what's going on. Example, just for you. Give me a little girl's name, anybody. Give me a little girl's name for my story. Susan.
Oh, we love Susan.
All right. Let's say hi to Susan. This is Susan.
Hi, Susie.
All right. When Susan was growing up, every year at Thanksgiving, her mother would make a ham. Her mother would season it. It would take a long time, marinate and all that stuff. And then just before she would put it in the oven, she would slice off a big piece around the corner. Every year. Thanksgiving is coming up. That's one of their cultural things. Eat ham for Thanksgiving. How many of you eat certain things on Thanksgiving? There's just certain things you eat, right? Yeah, right? So, yeah, all right. So, well, for a mother's 85th birthday, her mother came to visit Susie. And Susie had her daughter in the kitchen, and she was explained to her daughter how to make ham. Told her all the ingredients to put in, and you have to let it sit. Then she said, at the very end, before you put it in the oven, you got to slice off this big piece on the end. And that's what does it. Then you bake it, and then it tastes so good when it comes out. So, after the daughter left out of the room, the mother said, Susan, why didn't you tell your daughter that I cut off the end, and that's what gave it the flavor? Well, Mom, yours tastes so wonderful, and you did that every time you cooked it. She said, baby, I only did that because it wouldn't fit in my stove. Your stove is bigger than mine. What had happened in the translation? By observing, she saw a cultural practice that she thought was responsible for a certain output. And she lived by that. Oh, I can get closer to you, but I'm going to keep going because I got to go. All right. You see my point, hopefully. You see my point. Culture. Consider this phrase. The haystack was important because the cloth ripped. What does that mean? Chuck, not you.
No, I hate to say it, but actually I read an essay not more than yesterday that made me think of this.
Okay, wow, okay. What does this mean? Sarah, what does this mean? And I'm going to call some names. Jessica, when you read this, what does this mean? Come on, guys. All of you all are learned people. Wait. This is a simple sentence. Charles, what does it mean? Charles and Charles. Turner, Ralph, what does this mean? What is it? Does it make any sense at all?
Because the needles in the haystack.
Oh, now we're getting someplace. What do you mean by that?
Well, because you have a problem and there's a solution, but you just have to dig to get to the solution.
There we go. We're getting there. Let me see. I'm trying to find your name. Christina? Okay. Give me something. What do you think? Come on, guys. It's not a trick question. Come on, Kelly. Give me
I
something.
have no idea what the cloth has to do.
Gail.
I would make an inference that if you put in loose hay, and the cloth rips, it would fall, but if it's in a haystack, it would stay together.
Ah, that's imaginative. Okay. Pam, what you got for her?
Got nothing.
You got nothing.
Nothing.
That sentence looks pretty straightforward to me. What problems do you have with that sentence? Laura? You have issues with this sentence? But you can't infer you have any meaning to it? Oh, that's important. How many of you have ever been on a haystack? How many of you know what a haystack is?
Girl Scouts.
All right, Sarah, you've never been on a haystack?
I think I'm missing, I think I'm meaning if I knew what it was.
Someone explain to Sarah what a haystack is.
It's a sack of hay.
It is a stack of hay,
Bundled
right?
together.
Yeah.
Instead of don't fall apart.
Banded together with something.
Band it together.
Grass has been clipped and put in a big pot.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, is it fair to say that we really can't make sense of this sentence, even though we are learned people?
You have
And
to-
is the sentence grammatically correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we make sense out of it?
Because the two concepts don't.
You don't have the backstory to connect the two concepts.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Why do I need the backstory?
Because the whole concept of it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Well, that's one thing we've been taught. But versus you have an issue of the cloth ripping. You need the needle to fix the ripped cloth, but you have to be able to find the needle first.
Love it. Now let's look at the sentence. The haystack was important because the cloth ripped.
Yes.
But we got a parachute.
It's not a parachute, but then I thought, don't be crazy, that's too far.
How's that too far? Okay. Now what? Now what do you think?
The haystack saved.
Say again?
The haystack saved the person.
Soft landing.
Soft landing. Yeah.
I introduced one word. One. And this sentence makes sense to everybody. You're going to introduce concepts in your class that kids have no clue what you're saying about. And if you don't know how to introduce a word that makes it relevant to them, they're going to be just like you were. All you learned people. No context. How many times do you present information, provide no context, and say, I understand. As a teacher, I understood exactly what I was talking about. I know. And by the way, that's one of the problems with experts. They forget all the connections sometimes that those that are not experts have to make in order to arrive at a certain solution. Right? And even then, sometimes when I'm trying to get to this notion of retrieval, it still has issues. For example, they did a study with chess experts and novice chess experts, or novice chess players, which would be me. I love the game, but I'm not an expert. Anybody here play chess? So we at least heard of the game, right? Okay. And who was a famous chess player? Just anybody? Bobby Fischer?
Spassky.
Okay, right. So they did a test on retrieval, and this is a way out, but I think it's an important point. They put a board down and put the pieces on the board. Then they tested the two groups for to see how well they can remember where the pieces were. Which group do you think remembered the most pieces? The expert group or the novice group? The expert group. The expert group, right? It's pretty intuitive. They've been playing. Expert means that you've been doing something for at least 10,000 hours. That's how science considers you an expert, all right? So these are experts, all right? So in the two groups, the expert group, they can remember 8 times out of 10 the chessboard configurations. Next, the researchers did something. The same two groups, they took the chessboard and turned it sideways. They changed the configuration. Now, they did the same test. How many of you can remember? Which group could remember? Guess what they found? It was equal at best. What am I suggesting to you? Context is important. It's been proven by the research. It's important in your classroom. Up to this point, what have I tried to get you to understand? Even the simplest of sentences makes no sense if it's not provided with context. No sense. And you can say, why can't they understand this concept? Well, what is the context? Have you given a context that they can relate to? Are you using a story about water so that the fish can relate to what you're saying? Are you using a story about grass and running and jumping over a fence so that the horse can relate to the concept that you're trying to introduce? Oh, by the way, I am a cognitive constructivist. That means I believe that all new knowledge is based on prior knowledge. We look at cognitive schemas. What do you already know about something? Then we introduce something new. And from your place, from your perspective, from a sense of knowing, you're going to take that new knowledge and integrate it through your cultural lens. You're going to integrate it into what you already know. And it makes sense to you. It may not be accurate, but it makes sense to you. And as a teacher, if I'm not aware of all the dissonance that exists in the pre-existing knowledge, and if I don't try to explicate that is make it transparent, when I'm teaching, I've lost my students. So I can have the best developed lesson plans. But if I'm not understanding the culture of my students, something's going on. I'm going to try a little technology here. And I've got Jason there. Jason, hopefully this will work.
Welcome to Nana's Storytime. We are going to read Fish is Fish by Leo Leone. At the edge of the woods there was a pond, and there a minnow and a tadpole swam among the weeds. They were inseparable friends. One morning the tadpole discovered that during the night he had grown 2 little legs. "Look," he said triumphantly. "Look, I am a frog." "Nonsense," said the minnow. "How could you be a frog if only last night you were a little fish just like me?" They argued and argued until finally the tadpole said, "Frogs are frogs and fish is fish, and that's that." In the weeks that followed, the tadpole grew tiny front legs, and his tail got smaller and smaller. And then one fine day, a real frog now, he climbed out of the water and onto the grassy bank. The minnow too had grown and had become a full-fledged fish. He often wondered where his four-footed friend had gone, but days and weeks went by, and the frog did not return. Then one day, with a happy splash that shook the weeds, the frog jumped into the pond. "Where have you been?" asked the fish excitedly. "I have been about the world, hopping here and there," said the frog, "and I have seen extraordinary things." "Like what?" asked the fish. "Birds," said the frog mysteriously. "Birds!" And he told the fish about the birds, who had wings and 2 legs and many, many colors. As the frog talked, his friend saw the birds fly through his mind like large feathered fish. "What else?" asked the fish impatiently. "Cows," said the frog. "Cows! They have 4 legs, horns, eat grass, and carry pink bags of milk." "And people," said the frog. "Men, women, children." And he talked and talked until it was dark in the pond. But the picture in the fish's mind was full of lights and colors and marvelous things, and he couldn't sleep. Oh, if only he could jump about like his friend and see that wonderful world. He imagines them all looking like fish. And so the days went by. The frog had gone, and the fish just lay there dreaming about birds in flight, grazing cows, and those strange animals all dressed up that his friend called people. One day he finally decided that come what may, he too must see them, and so with a mighty whack of his tail he jumped clear out of the water and onto the bank. He landed in the dry, warm grass, and there he lay gasping for air, unable to breathe or to move. "Help!" he groaned feebly. Luckily, the frog, who had been hunting butterflies nearby, saw him and with all his strength pushed him back into the pond. Still stunned, the fish floated about for an instant. Then he breathed deeply, letting the clean, cool water run through his gills. Now he felt weightless again, and with an ever so slight motion of his tail he could move to and fro, up and down, as before. The sun rays reached down into the weeds and gently shifted patches of luminous color. This world was surely the most beautiful of all the worlds. He smiled at his friend, the frog who sat watching him from a lily leaf. "You were right," he said. "Fish is fish." And that's the end of our story. Thanks for listening.
Great. Interesting little story. But I think with my time, I think I'm going to end with this, but let's summarize the story. I know you guys like to see things more than once, but I think we can do it. All right, let's reconstruct the story. Tadpole, fish, right? Tadpole turns into a frog and leaves the pond to explore the world, all right? When he returns, he talks to his buddy, the fish, about what he sees out in the world. Now, when he talks about a cow, in his mind, what does a cow look like? In the fish's mind, what does a cow look like? A fish with what? Yeah. And so, how does he imagine a bird? A fish with? Yeah. And how does he imagine people? Now, even if the frog had shown him pictures of the things he was talking about, in the fish's mind, he would have gone back to what he knew, his cultural frame of reference. You kind of agree with that? That's what he knew. That's his frame of reference, right? So what can we take from that story? What lessons can we learn from that? There are plenty. I know you only had a little time to think about it, but what can we learn?
Well, for me, because I have a student currently that whenever she responds to anything, she always has to put it into her context, and she gets it. So for me, when I look at it, I think it helps to build on, to have something to build on. It's easier for a student to learn
Okay, okay,
than versus if they have nothing
okay.
or little.
What other thoughts jump up when you're looking at the story?
If you're unaware of something, it's a new concept, but someone introduces it to you, you can only go on what you are understanding from them. It's like the same thing with the things that you're taught growing up, that's what you know, until you are expanded beyond that capacity. And so sometimes being as illustrative as we can with our concepts is important for that person to paint that picture in their mind.
Oh my, we're gonna come back to that. Very good. One more.
The frog probably didn't know how the fish was picturing things.
Ah.
And we often don't know. We think they're getting it, but there could be a difference there unless we're really engaged with them. We don't know how they're getting our information.
Very interesting. Ralph, you're in graduate program and you teach graduate students. What kind of, how does this relate to anything you've seen or anything you did?
I think all of us work from our preconceived ideas and frame of reference. So you filter everything that you think about through what that lens is, what's your lens of perspective. So I think, it's the role of education, the role of teachers is to expand that lens. Students, wherever they're from, to expand their base of knowledge, not only theoretical knowledge, but their experiential knowledge. Expand that frame of reference or that lens of perception.
And again, guys, none of this is earth-shattering or new. I'm just trying to help you reconceptualize how you think about it. And since I'm from the College of Ed, I just thought about it, all the things that we have our pre-service or prospective teachers do. So I'm coming from that perspective. However, I think this can be applicable for several disciplines across disciplinary. We all have preconceptions from what teaching looks like. One of my issues with having our student teachers observe is that they don't see the back end. They don't see the reflections. They don't see the specifically designed strategies that teachers implement. They just see teaching and they make preconceptions, right? Right? Just like the frog did or just like the fish did. So they think teaching is easy because they only see the superficial trappings of teaching. They don't see any of the back part. They don't see behind the veil. Okay? Further, when you're introducing concepts that they're already familiar with because they've grown up a certain way, they assimilate those concepts into what they already know or what they've already been taught. So any nuances are lost. Okay? And finally, as I've tried to illustrate, there are only 2 or 3 things that I'm trying to illustrate. And one of them is you cannot separate what you're trying to teach from the culture and the social context of your student. You can't do it. Else they're going to look at you like you looked at me when I gave you that sentence about the parachute. Something that you think they should know, but without the context, they're not going to get it. Got a question for you. Is the frog a good teacher? By the way, you're the frogs. Is the frog a good teacher? Give him the information that he needs so he can pass a test. I would say he isn't, but that's just me. Is the frog a good teacher? It gave that fish some information that almost killed him.
Wow.
Who has the primary responsibility for the burden of learning? Is it the teacher, the frog, or is it the fish? Hey, I gave you the information. You can't perform. If you can't demonstrate you've learned, that's not my problem. Ouch. Who has the burden?
It's a two-way street, right?
At least a two-way street.
It's a communication. You can't just tell someone something and expect them to know it. You have to have a dialogue and opening up. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Okay, what's your issues? How can I help you better understand what I'm trying to get across? It's just like talking to a person, conversation.
So, Clint, based on that, how could the frog help the fish understand life on land? Number one, the frog had no idea the fish was going to jump out of the water and try to... How could the frog help the fish understand life on land? How do you help your students understand a difficult concept? Do you just tell them and then that's it? I told you, I lectured, you got an example, boom. How could the frog help the fish understand life on land? Come on, guys. You all are learned people. Talk to me. What can the frog do?
Active experience?
Give the fish some experience? What kind of experience?
2 minutes on land, back in the water.
2 minutes. So we're going to almost kill you, but we're going to give you a little experience and we're going to put you back in the water. What do you think you would learn from this? I better not get out there out too long, right?
Yes?
What'd you say, Ralph? What you got for me?
Clinical experience.
A clinical experience that'll almost kill him, but he'll learn something. All right, I
You
get it.
could bring a human into the water,
Oh,
so you can see what a human looks like.
oh.
Make connections to land versus in the water.
I love this guy. He said make connections.
Yeah.
So that gets to a high impact practice. What is it that we want our students to do? What is the end goal of all this education? We want our students to be able to do what?
Apply it.
To be able to think, self-monitor. Why didn't the fish ask the question, you know, the humans have on a hat. I mean, I can't imagine kind of trying to swim like that, right? Somebody has to teach that fish to self-monitor, to ask that frog some questions. That frog is a bad teacher. It didn't monitor what he was telling that fish, didn't go back and check for misunderstandings, didn't put it in a language that the fish could understand. There was no experience. That fish almost died in the process. Let me get closer to you. Your students are flunking because you're not making your stuff relevant. You're not giving them examples that they can relate to. And you can't do that unless you know them. Like you knew the frog, like you knew the horse, like you knew the monkey, like you knew the fish. Like you should know your students.
How?
Let's get to the how. I had a teacher, a friend of mine. This is on high school level, of course. And I'm going off. That's one of the issues, I think. There's not much done with higher ed for college students on this topic, which is why I'm writing a book that talks about this kind of stuff. That's another subject. But what he does, 2 weeks before he begins any instruction, all he does is get to know his students. The first 2 weeks of the semester, he does no instruction, nothing. They do all kind of games, they talk, he gets to know them. And the rest of the year, you know what happens? He has no discipline problem. Those kids make good grades. He's formed a relationship with them. Everybody can find a way to do it. You can come early before class. You can ask the kids what kind of projects they're involved in, go to their game. You can do all sorts of things. Get to know your students. One thing I like to do in my class, I like to do Google surveys. So at the beginning of class, I have like a Google form that they all submit, and they talk about the things that they like to do, and I talk about the things that I like to do, and then I put them up on the board, and we look at, hey, here are some commonalities, and I have people sitting next to each other who've known each other for 2 or 3 years, but they didn't know they had some things in common. So technology is a wonderful tool that will allow us to get to know each other. And so what you can do, Chuck, after you know a little bit about them, when you're doing your class, teaching your instruction, and you have to give an example, you can remember back to some of the things that they like to do and integrate that into, that's a start. That's showing them that they have a sense of belonging, they have a sense of place, that you're interested in their lives. And it's something that's common these days with these millennials. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So the order of things is establish a relationship, let them know how much you care, then work them to death. Give them all the rigor.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I had a teacher like that in high school. And English teacher had to do a paper. I was busy playing ball and I just turned something in. She gave me an F on that paper. She said, this is not your best work. I'm giving you an F. Go do it again. I learned my lesson. But she had faith in me. She knew I could do better. Do you give your kids the benefit of the doubt? Or is it one and done? What else can I tell you here? The fish, in his attempt to understand what the frog told him, put things in his context. And if it weren't for the knowledgeable other, in this case, the frog, the fish would have died. And in fact, we have students who are dying every semester because they have no context for learning, and some of them just drop out of the learning process. My time is so gone. So, final thoughts. Learning is enhanced. Chuck, I like your questions. When teachers pay attention to the knowledge and the beliefs and the cultural backgrounds the students bring to the classroom. Students come to the class with preconceptions of how the world works. It's no longer in vogue to think that kids have a blank slate. They have sophisticated reasonings. And it's our job to unfold those, make those transparent, and use that to build instruction. Again, from a cognitive, constructivist standpoint, all new knowledge is constructed on old knowledge. So either you take the new knowledge and reframe it, or take it and discard it. And although experiences are important, the fish has some nice experiences, it didn't mean nothing though unless it had a knowledgeable other. So we're always going to need a teacher, always going to need you, because you got that conceptual base that we need. So you've got the experience and the conceptual. You put those two together and you bring in their cultural background and beliefs and that sort of thing, and hopefully we can see a difference in what we're doing with our kids. I'm over my time. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.